The sky was the color of old concrete. Cold wind needled through Malik Johnson's hoodie as he weaved through traffic. One hand gripping the handlebars, the other clutching a brown paper bag tied tight with string. His thighs burned from the incline, but he kept going, pedaling uphill, breath rising like smoke in the February air. He'd memorized the address. Navatech Systems, 8410 Broadmoor Lane, the biggest building on the block. Glass panels reflected the dull gray above, giving the impression the building was suspended in clouds. He pulled up to the side entrance, his breath coming short, heart pounding not from exertion, but from what always came next, a security guard stepped forward, stocky, pale, early 50s, eyes squinting. "Delivery?" he asked, already suspicious. Malik lifted the thermal bag. "Yup, Thai food, 17th floor." The guard held out a hand. "ID. App. It's a lunch drop, not a passport check. Company policy." The man didn't blink. Malik reached into his jacket, pulled out his ID. The guard took his time, flipping it back and forth like he was deciphering a counterfeit bill. People in suits passed by the turnstile without a glance or question. Nobody asked for their IDs. "Wait here," the guard muttered, and disappeared inside his booth. Malik stood still. His fingers were stiff from the cold, his legs aching, but he didn't move. He'd learned early that shifting too much made people nervous. So he stayed statue still, eyes low, posture relaxed, non-threatening and visible. Minutes dragged, finally. The guard returned, buzzed him through the gate without a word. No apology. No thank you. As the turnstile clicked behind him, Malik walked into a lobby so bright it stung his eyes. Polished marble floors, gold-lettered signs, digital panels pulsing blue with the Navatech logo. He pressed the elevator button and waited inside. The mirror walls reflected back a tall young man with a delivery backpack and worn jeans. Malik adjusted his hoodie and stared at his own face. Brown skin, tired eyes. 20 years old, but today he felt older. Like something inside him was slowly calcifying. He used to think this job was temporary, just until things stabilized. Just until tuition was back within reach. But that was a year ago. The elevator climbed. No soul. He wasn't ashamed of delivering food, but he hated that it gave people permission to decide who he was. The way they looked through him, or worse around him. Like he was part of the furniture, or something to avoid eye contact with. The elevator dinged. 17th floor. He stepped into a hallway lined with frosted glass offices. It was quiet, sterile, and expensive. Malik moved quickly, following the digital signs to AI Infrastructure Division. Just before he reached the double doors, he heard voices, tense and sharp. "That's impossible. The redundancy checks should have triggered." "They didn't, Josh. We've got 40 minutes before the investor call." A warning light blinked red above the lab. Something was clearly wrong. Still, nobody noticed him standing there. Malik set the bag down on the delivery shelf. He waited the required 2 minutes for pickup, then turned back toward the elevator. But as he walked away, his eyes caught a schematic flickering on a hallway monitor. A diagnostic readout of a system failure, syntax loop overlap detected. Code fragments crawled across the screen. Malik froze. He tilted his head, read the flow. Something clicked. The lines of code looked familiar, way too familiar. Malik didn't mean to linger. He should have been in the elevator by now, descending 12 floors and back on his bike before the next order hit. 8. But something about that screen held him still. Syntax loop overlap detected. Neural flow interrupted. He squinted. The recursive cascade, he knew that shape. He'd written code like that, late at night, on his refurbished laptop in his bedroom, debugging for hours until the lines stopped tangling. Behind the glass doors, alarms began to wail shrill, artificial, the kind of sound that made you feel like something far bigger than yourself had just gone wrong. The system just went non-responsive. A voice shouted from inside. "I like churn slight." Through the clear panel, he saw them, maybe a dozen engineers, all in bad-fitting button-downs, hunched over terminals. Screens blinked with graphs and error logs. A few people paced, barking into phones. One man banged the desk. "This is bad," someone muttered. A woman's voice cut through the noise. Firm, controlled. "If we don't get the reinforcement loop operational in 10, the prototype fails certification." Another engineer threw up his hands. 20 of us, and no one has a damn fix." Malik blinked. He took a small step closer, pretending to glance at his phone, but his eyes stayed locked on the screen by the hallway and external monitor mirroring the live schematic from inside. The layout wasn't that different from the open-source neural net packages he'd been studying. They'd tried to compress decision trees in real time too tightly. He could already see where the recursive stack collapsed in on itself. It wasn't just a bug, it was the structure. The whole thing was designed wrong, but no one looked at him. No one asked. He was just the delivery guy, still standing there, invisible. Inside, a junior engineer pulled at his collar. "Clara, if this leaks, it won't," the woman snapped. "We're not losing the Ravex contract because of a bad patch. Somebody figure it out." Malik flinched at the name. Clara, that voice so certain. She had to be in charge. He hesitated. For a brief second, he imagined stepping in, just pointing it out. But he didn't move. Instead, he slowly backed away from the screen and turned toward the elevator again, code still pulsing in his mind. As he pressed the button, the hallway stayed in chaos behind him. The doors slid open with a soft ding, and Malik was still deciding, was it worth saying anything at all? The elevator doors slid open, but Malik didn't step in. He stood frozen, thumb hovering near the button panel, his mind still tracing the error loop on that screen. Recursive overload. Too much weight on the learning thread. He knew how to reroute it. He knew. The doors closed again behind him with a soft sigh. He turned around, walking slowly back toward the AI lab. He could still hear the rising tension inside. Panic was beginning to harden into anger, now blame, swirling without direction. Somebody check the backup nodes again. We did. It's not just the data, it's the logic. Get Sanderson on the line now. Malik cleared his throat as he stepped through the half-open glass door. No one looked up. He walked over to the edge of the room, careful not to cross any imaginary line that might make someone bark. "You're not supposed to be in here." He glanced at the primary schematic again, then reached into his backpack and pulled out the small notepad he always carried. It was tattered, half full of code sketches, equations, flowcharts. He flipped to a blank page and started scribbling. 5 minutes. That's all it took to sketch a workaround. He held up the notepad and said softly, "I think I know where it's..." Breaking. No response. Just typing, clicking, arguing. Louder this time. "Excuse-moi. I think I can help." Junior engineer with slicked hair and tired eyes turned fully toward him. He looked Malik up and down the hoodie, the bike chain around his waist, the delivery logo on his sleeve. "You think you can help?" he said, smirking. "Look, man, just drop the food and go. We've got enough problems without someone's." Side hustle weighing in? Malik hesitated. "You're overloading your decision branches. You've got an infinite feedback loop forming because the logic gate is too rigid to adapt mid-sequence. If you add a dynamic override like here," he showed the notepad, "you can relieve the tension in real time." The room went quiet. For a beat, then laughter. The same engineer scoffed. "Jesus, you deliver Thai food, not algorithms." Malik felt the heat rush to his face. He nodded once, tucked the notebook back into his bag, turned to leave. But as he reached the door, a voice stopped him. "Wait." Malik turned. A woman, late 30s, dark blazer, tightly wound hair, was watching him. Dr. Clara Voss, she, stepped forward, eyes sharp. She reached out her hand. "May I see that?" Malik hesitated, then slowly handed over the notepad. She studied it in silence. The room stilled again, tension shifting. "This is a recursive detachment model," she murmured. "It could work." The smirking junior stepped forward. "Clara, seriously? You're taking advice from a..." Her eyes snapped to him. "Quiet." She turned back to Malik. "Where did you learn this?" Malik met her gaze, voice low. "At home. On my own." She nodded once, curt, but not dismissive. "Come with me," she said. "Now." Malik followed Clara down the hallway, heart pounding louder than his footsteps. She moved with crisp precision, heels tapping the tile like a metronome counting down to something big. She didn't speak until they turned into a narrow corridor and stopped in front of a security-coded door. She turned to him. "Where'd you learn to read neural architecture like that?" "I didn't," he said, adjusting his backpack strap. "I built my own models, from scratch. I had to reverse engineer most of it, because I couldn't afford the licenses." Clara stared at him for a long moment, as if weighing the truth in his voice. Then she keyed in the door. Inside, chaos. 20 engineers, most seated, some pacing, all under pressure. A massive curved screen dominated the room, full of red error logs, system trees, and blinking indicators. A digital clock in the corner read T0 hours, 11 minutes and 48 seconds. "Team," Clara announced. "This is Malik. He has a proposed fix." Every head turned. A thin man at the center scoffed. "Clara, this isn't the time for diversity experiments." She didn't even blink. "He's the only one who's diagnosed the logic fault correctly. I'm not trying to step on anyone's work. But your current architecture loops back into itself every fourth predictive cycle. That's why the stack crashes. It's chasing its own output." Another engineer crossed her arms, and you figured this out. "How?" "By watching the hallway screen for 90 seconds, he replied, a low ripple of laughter, sharp disbelieving. Malik didn't flinch. He pulled out his notepad, flipped to a diagram he'd refined the night before while eating noodles in his room, and laid it on the table. "This is an adaptive gate reroute," he explained. "It floats the logic node just before it locks into recursive chaining. You add this one dynamic parameter here and the feedback collapses before it cannibalizes the parent thread." Silence. Someone typed quietly, plugging the changes into the live test environment. Seconds later, green lights flashed on the board. One by one, error logs disappeared. Clara exhaled. "Run it again." They did this time. The entire left quadrant lit green. A murmur spread across the room. Then the door slammed open. The CTO, red-faced, stormed in. "Who authorized a patch during runtime? You want to sink the RevX deal?" Clara stood tall. "He fixed it." She pointed to Malik. The CTO looked at him like he'd just noticed he existed. Then back at the screen, now quiet, stable, green dot. No one spoke. Malik swallowed hard. For once, he didn't shrink, didn't apologize for being right. The silence wasn't triumphant. It was stunned. Like the air had been knocked out of the room and no one quite knew what came next. Malik turned to Clara. "So, what happens now?" Her expression flickered. Pride, conflict, calculation. "Now," she said quietly, "we see who's watching." For a brief moment, Malik thought something had changed. After the fix, people looked at him differently, not quite with respect, but with caution. The same way one looks at a wild animal that just did something terrifyingly smart. Clara had given him a nod, the kind you give someone who just pulled you back from a cliff. But beyond that, silence returned just as fast as it had broken. The next morning, his phone buzzed with a message. "Please come to HR, 9:30 sharp." When he arrived, a man in a blazer smiled too wide and spoke too carefully. "We appreciate your involvement yesterday," he said, sliding a sleek envelope across the glass table. A $500 gesture of gratitude and an agreement. Standard non-disclosure. Just to make sure details of our internal infrastructure remain protected. Malik blinked. "You want me to sign an NDA? It's more of a formality, you understand, of course." He didn't move. The envelope sat like a bribe between them. No offer, no job, just this. Malik asked, as the HR man's smile tightened. "We're not in a position to alter employment structures based on one incident, but we do value your initiative." Malik stood slowly. Right, initiative. Left the envelope untouched. As he stepped out of the building, the wind stung his face. The same building he'd walked into, invisible, he was leaving just as unseen. His shoulders sagged as he unlocked his bike. Didn't even realize he was crying until he tasted salt on his lips. He rode home in silence. That night the house was quiet. His mom was washing greens in the kitchen sink. humming a tune that reminded him of summers in Georgia. She turned when she heard him drop his bag, her eyes narrowing instantly. What happened? Malik collapsed onto the couch and finally let go. Words stumbled out about the patch, the engineers, the gift card, the silence. All of it. She listened. Then she walked over, knelt in front of him, and took his face in both hands. "You think they didn't see you?" she said gently. "Baby, they saw you. That's the problem. You're not supposed to be in that room. You're not supposed to be that smart. You scare them." He looked at her, tears in his eyes. "But I was right," he whispered. "You were more than right," she said. "We're brilliant. Don't let them make you forget that. You don't need their approval to know your worth." Malik closed his eyes, breathing in her words like medicine. He didn't know it yet, but someone had seen him. Malik hadn't told anyone outside his house what happened at Nevatech. He didn't post about it, didn't hint, didn't rant. He simply went back to work peddling deliveries, sketching in his notebook, head down. The rejection still sat heavy on his chest, like a seatbelt tightened too far. He tried not to think about the room full of engineers who'd dismissed him, or the HR handshake, or the untouched envelope. But one morning, his phone buzzed before sunrise. "Yo, bro, you in the news?" Then another, "Is this you?" He rubbed his eyes, pulled up the link and stared. A shaky, grainy video clearly taken on a phone. Him in the Navatech lab, notebook in hand, explaining the recursive loop issue in real time. You couldn't hear everything clearly, but it was enough. And then, the screen lighting up in green dot posted by an anonymous account. No caption, just "They tried to erase this. Don't let them." It spread like fire. Tech bloggers, TikTok commentators, morning talk shows. The delivery boy genius, the system-breaking savant. Memes cropped up with Malik's hoodie drawn over Einstein's face. Hashtags multiplied. He sat in his room, phone buzzing nonstop, feeling not excitement but dread. By the third day, a reporter from TechLoop called, then CNN, then a podcast hosted by a tech billionaire who loved stories that disrupt the mold. They all wanted a version of him. "Not the truth, just a story," a producer asked. "Can you recreate the moment on camera? Maybe wear the same outfit?" Another said, "It's just incredible, someone like you, no degree, fixing things the pros couldn't." "Someone like me," Malik echoed flatly. In one clip that went viral, he paused mid-interview and asked, "Why is it so hard to believe I'm smart?" They cut that part. Instead, they ran with "high school dropout outsmarts engineers." Malik read the headline twice. 3 times. He felt sick. That night, a quiet message came through Twitter DM. "Hey, I'm the one who filmed it. I'm sorry they didn't treat you right. I couldn't let it disappear." Layla in turn. He stared at the name. Layla. A face from the lab. He remembered her now. Glasses, quiet, always typing in the corner. She hadn't laughed. She hadn't looked away. He replied, "Thank you. Really." She sent one more message. "They're still trying to bury it internally. PR is freaking out, but people see you now. Don't let them twist it." Malik closed his phone. He was being seen but through a lens warped by curiosity, not respect. They weren't celebrating his mind. They were shocked he had one. That wasn't visibility. It was exposure. He stood by the window and stared into the city. He wasn't done yet. For every message calling him a legend, Malik received 10 more that burned. Affirmative action, Einstein. Bet he stole the code. Just another quota higher in the making. Someone posted his home address. Another uploaded pictures of his mom from her Facebook profile with a caption, "Raised by a welfare queen." No wonder. Malik didn't sleep much after that. Every knock on the door made his pulse spike. Every notification felt like another rock tossed at his window. Fame wasn't a gift. It was a target. He considered disappearing. Then came the invitation. TechCore. Global Innovation Summit. A full scholarship pass. Travel covered. "We'd love for you to speak on youth innovation and diverse talent." Malik hesitated. He didn't want to be a talking point. But something inside him, a stubborn pulse, told him to go. The conference buzzed with LED lights and glossy lanyards. Everyone wore the same eager smile. But when Malik arrived, no one recognized him. At registration, they told him to stand. Over there, while they processed the VIPs, at the main hall, there was no nameplate at the front table for him. Instead, he was seated in the second row. Behind a fintech startup founder wearing shoes worth more than Malik's rent, he stayed quiet. On stage, panel on emerging voices was already underway. Clara Voss was there, crisp, commanding, the same voice from that glass lab, midway through her segment. She paused. "I'd like to address something," she said, lifting her eyes toward the crowd. "A few weeks ago, someone outside this room solved a problem my team of engineers couldn't. Not because he had a degree, not because he had clearance, but because he had the brilliance and the guts to speak up." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Clara's voice rose. "He's not a fluke. He's not an exception. He's the future." She stepped back from the mic and pointed. "Malik Johnson, please stand." All eyes turned. Malik stood slowly, heart thudding. Some people clapped. Others just stared. He wasn't sure what he felt: pride, shame. Heat bloomed behind his ears. The applause faded quickly, replaced by the next speaker. Still, something had shifted. Not in them. In him, the applause from the summit faded quickly, like it had never been real. A week later, Malik sat on the floor of his bedroom, surrounded by empty water bottles, job listings, and a single sheet of paper scrawled with crossed-out ideas. His inbox chimed softly. Subject: Application update. Dear Mr. Johnson, thank you for your interest in the junior AI analyst position at Stratadine Labs. After careful review, we've decided to move forward with other candidates whose experience aligns more closely with our current needs. He didn't even flinch. This was number 14. 14 companies. 14 rejections. Some cited his lack of formal credentials. Others said too much media attention. One never responded at all. His name had trended online for solving what a room of engineers couldn't but on paper. He was still Malik Johnson, delivery driver. He closed his laptop and leaned his head against the wall, eyes burning. The spotlight had given him attention. It hadn't given him access. A soft knock came at the door. His mom peeked in. "Any luck?" He shook his head. "Still just noise." Ow. Stepped in, sat beside him, and didn't say anything for a while. Just placed her hand on his shoulder and squeezed. When she left, Malik stared at the wall. Something inside him, quiet but clear, whispered, "Stop waiting. Build anyway." He opened his notebook, flipped past the old sketches, found a blank page. He thought about the Novatek failure, about the way algorithms could reinforce their own bias. He thought about the way he wasn't the first person passed over and wouldn't be the last. That night, he opened a new repo on GitHub and typed the title, Mira Logic, a framework for transparency in AI. Learning systems, no degrees. No HR filters. Just code. Each night, he added more small pieces of a tool meant to spot the very kind of failure he'd uncovered at Novatek. Not just a fix, but a mirror. Something to show when systems were biased, when they looped into themselves without question. Something honest. He didn't ask permission. He didn't need it anymore. The first download happened. 2 days after Malik posted the repo, he thought it was a bot at first. Then another came, this time from an IP address linked to a community college in Chicago, then one from a tiny university in Lagos, then 10 more. Within a week, Mira Logic had been forked 50 times. He stared at the metrics in disbelief. Not viral, but real. Respected. It wasn't flashy. Just clean code. Clearly annotated. With use case examples that showed how bias crept into AI models through flawed training data and static logic trees. Malik didn't just explain the issue, he gave people tools to fix it. Open. Free. He updated the README to include a line that felt right. You shouldn't have to beg to be led. And to make a difference. The messages started arriving soon. After, "Hey, I used your module in my capstone project. Our professor is building a course around it. Thank you. They aren't ready for you, but we are. Keep going. It's finally something that's made for us." Not against us. He read every one. They didn't call him a genius or a prodigy. They just called him helpful. Necessary. Seen. A small online publication ran a story titled, Mirror logic, the ethics engine nobody saw coming. Lara Voss reshared it with a short caption, "I told you." He is the future. Malik didn't respond. He wasn't building for applause anymore. One afternoon, got a message from Leela, the former intern. Just saw the update. "You're building the thing we all wish we had inside Novatek." He stared at that message for a long time, then smiled. He realized then he'd stopped waiting to be chosen. Now, others were choosing his work. By the end of the month, 3 schools were piloting mirror logic as part of their ethics curriculum. A nonprofit reached out about a grant. A collective of young coders asked if they could expand the framework into other languages. Malik said yes. Every time, this wasn't just a project anymore, it was a doorway, and he was holding it open. The lights dimmed. The hum of conversation softened to silence. Malik stood just off stage, palms damp, heart pacing faster than his breath. He stared. Down at the card in his hand, though he'd long since memorized the words, a stage manager gave him a subtle nod. It was time. He stepped into the light. The room erupted in applause before he'd even said a word. Not the hollow kind he'd once heard at the tech. Some at this was deeper, earnest, waiting. Rows of faces looked back at him, mostly young, mostly black and brown, all of them wearing the unmistakable expression of someone who knows what it means to be underestimated. This wasn't a corporate conference. It was the first Kadrut Equity Conference hosted at a local university. Born from a coalition of schools and nonprofits who'd adopted mirror logic as part of their new Ethics and Access initiative. Malik had tried to decline the keynote at first, saying he wasn't polished enough. Leela, now part of the organizing board, had replied simply, "They don't want polished. They want real. They want you." He cleared his throat. "Hi," he began, voice a little unsteady. "Malik Johnson. A year ago, I was riding a bike with a thermal bag on my back. I was broke, exhausted, angry, and invisible. Silence hung in the room, not cold but heavy. Listening. I walked into a tech company to drop off lunch and ended up solving a failure that 20 engineers couldn't figure out. Not because I was smarter than them, but because I'd been building in the dark for years, learning without permission, without a syllabus, without a seat at anyone's table." He took a breath. They didn't celebrate me. Not really. They tried to hide it. HR gave me a gift card and told me to be quiet. A few murmurs rippled through the audience. Lee continued. But what they couldn't erase, was truth. Truth spreads faster than power can contain it. Stepped forward slightly. You've probably seen the headlines. The memes. The interviews where they cut my words and kept the parts that made me look like a surprise. Laughter now knowing. Bitter. Honest. "I'm not a surprise," he said. "And neither are you." Malik paused. His voice steadied. "You were never the problem. The system was?" Applause surged through the room, louder now, fuller. He raised a hand. It quieted again. "Look, I'm not a founder. I don't have $1 million startup, but I built something that opened a door. And I'm holding it open as long as I can. So whether you're in a classroom or coding on your cousin's busted laptop, just know you're already enough. You don't need their nod to start. You don't need to wait to be chosen." He looked out into the crowd, eyes catching faces. Of young girls in hoodies, teens with laptops on their knees, elders watching with quiet pride. "I was told I didn't belong in those rooms," Malik said. "But I've stopped waiting for them to pull out a chair. I'm building my own table, and there's space for all of you at it." The audience rose to their feet, a standing ovation, not stunned, not shocked, but certain. Not amazed that he was smart, just glad he had spoken. He stepped back from the mic. Not with swagger, but with stillness. Peace. Backstage, his mom was waiting. She wrapped him in a hug so tight he almost couldn't breathe. "I told you," she whispered. "They'd see. You one day." Malik smiled, tears in his eyes. "No," he said. They saw each other. And for the first time in a long time, Malik Johnson-Dell, livery boy self-taught coder, outsider turned pathfinder, felt something deeper than recognition. He felt home.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.